Great. Thank you very much, Kayla. I appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's webinar. We certainly look forward to an engaging dialogue with some industry leaders from the cybersecurity industry. Today, we're going to have what I'd like to consider a empathetic but real discussion about cybersecurity and how it's evolving in the age of COVID. Most importantly, we're going to try to cover it in a way that is relatable to all, and really touching upon the people, process, and technology aspect of managing our respective programs and kind of navigating through what is considered a new norm, if you will. Before we get things kicked off, I'd like to ask that our distinguished panelists introduce themselves. And if we could start with Nicole and make our way around, I'd greatly appreciate it. Nicole?
Hi, I'm Nicole Ford. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for Carrier Global Corporation, and I'm excited to be here.
Christian von Reventlow, 15 years of C-level executive in the technology industry for major brands as Deutsche Telekom, Telstra, Intel, you name it. Glad to be here today to discuss the realities, and thanks to Eric for organizing this.
Yeah, and I'm Chris Zell. I'm the Vice President and Head of Information Security and Infrastructure for the Wendy's company. As well, I'm a 22-year U.S. Air Force veteran, so been in the cyber game for a little while. So again, thanks to Eric and the team for having us aboard today.
Excellent. Thank you all again. I appreciate you joining me as well. You know, it's an interesting new world that we're living in today. And you all as cybersecurity executives had to find yourself responding to the pandemic by quickly instituting some of the measures to maintain business continuity and protect against some of the new cybersecurity threats. I'm sure your team, like most everyone else, are highly consumed with patching remote systems over virtual private networks that have probably been strained by the increased workload. I'm sure you're increasing monitoring around the spiking threat levels, including what some are tagging as a near 7-fold increase in the spear phishing attacks since the beginning of the pandemic, and obviously having to manage the increased remote workers and being bombarded by the different attacks that are being themed under COVID creates a new dynamic for you as well. But we all can probably agree that it's not a singular problem, right? It's really about people, process, and technology. And with that said, I'd like to just start with the first question with you, Christian, around, how are you seeing the, your company's security goals and objectives shift amongst them, in the midst of COVID, the COVID pandemic? And then if you can, touch upon briefly how you are seeing the risk appetite and the tolerance for risk shift as a result.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So let me maybe put the people lens on, if I may use your framework, people, process, and technology. And so what I'm actually seeing is looking at our environment, that people which you actually assume would be always there did just disappear. Basically, locations like in the Philippines or Malaysia just went offline because people simply couldn't go to the office anymore. And we actually were not really prepared for suddenly have all our support staff in home locations. So what I'm actually seeing happening here is to develop a new agility, actually to have the ability to move operations across the globe to different locations, offices, to people's homes, sometimes to their vacation location, and actually making that happen in a more coordinated fashion. So clearly everybody here on our end worked 24/7 to make it all happen. Going forward, we need to have a plan, operated with decent processes and actually tools supporting this this move. So maybe that as an initial reflection on that, Eric. Mike, back to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Christian. How about yourself, Nicole? What have you been seeing as it relates to the shift in the security goals and objectives for your organization?
I think we weren't really expecting a COVID-19 pandemic. I know what we saw, and I know that, we saw it move from Asia to Europe, then to the US. For whatever reason, we just didn't think it was going to be as big as it is, right? So could I potentially say we were ready? The answer is no, right? And I think a lot of organizations found themselves in the same situation. How has it shifted? I mean, for me, remember, I'm in a very unique situation because we were actually spinning off from United Technologies and becoming a separate standalone company. And all of that was happening at the same time. So we were in the planning phases of becoming that standalone company and making the right investments in technology and moving our security program forward. And so when I think about what we said our goals were at the time, it was really build this cybersecurity program, build out our digital technology footprint. That was our focus. And we then had to kind of shift and say, okay, well, do we have everything in place to handle a pandemic? Because that wasn't something on the radar. We weren't saying, oh, we're preparing for COVID-19 as well. So imagine building, right? Trying to separate, go public, and COVID-19 happens all at the same time. So it was
Unbelievable, Nicole. Unbelievable. This is like climbing Mount Everest at least twice at the same day.
crazy. And it was like climbing the mountain, and also, when you think about it, it's climbing the mountain, trying to plan to go down the mountain again, and all of the other planning, that things that you couldn't have imagined, we had to start to think about. So we really shifted to a more a mode where we were just really trying to make sure that people were able to work from home safely and securely. And that became the priority. And so in some instances, we kept key security controls in place, but other things we loosened, like bringing machines home, right? So we have, a split of knowledge workers, and we have plant workers, people who don't typically work from home. And now all of a sudden they have to work from home. They have to take their desktops home, which is, we're heavily laptops, but there are some desktops. So those controls we loosened in order for people to get home, have peace of mind, right, and still be able to work from home. So now you have this workforce that's not designed to work from home at home, and they don't have the skill sets necessary in some instances to know how to do that. So it was a lot of training, a lot of hand holding to get people into this new normal of remote work. And it's now, how do you as a cyber team flex, because you're used to 20% of your workforce being remote, right? But you're not used to 100% of your workforce being remote. And it was all of the challenges around that we had to deal with. So, when I think about it, yeah, it was a shift, and it was a shift to, focus on people. So people first, health, healthy situations, and really, how do we create processes that are still going to create and protect our workforce, and still provide some protection to the organization and our assets at the same time. So, a regular 8-hour workday turned into like 15-hour workdays for most of the team. And we have to kind of manage that burnout and making sure we can still do all of those things we were doing, building, maintaining. And now we have this COVID like umbrella that we find ourselves under now.
Well, there's a lot packed in there, Nicole, and I'm going to try to unpack some of it through some of the conversation. Chris, I'd love to get your perspective as well.
Yeah. So I think what we're hearing from both Nicole and Christian is really about risk management, right? When it comes down to it at the end of the day. And I believe it was Mike Tyson said that everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, right? And COVID was a bit of a punch in the face
Very
to
much
us,
to the
right?
point, Chris.
And look, I think the best time to have a business continuity and a disaster recovery plan is before you need it, right? So there are some organizations that may have been postured to be able to weather the storm a little bit better initially. But to Nicole's point, I mean, who would have contemplated something of this magnitude, right? I think when we talk about risk management, risk management is all about the ability to be able to direct and laser focus your efforts and your resources in the area of the business that needs it the most at that point in time, right? Effective risk management is not a one and done process, right? You've got to continually assess your attack surface, your threats, your risks, the velocity, the impacts, and be able to rapidly mobilize to be able to direct activities to those areas where you might need to enable additional compensating and mitigating controls. A lot of organizations within my industry have, I'll say, gotten pretty good at doing that. I mean, if you look at our operating model within quick serve restaurant business, we have these very large global brands in many cases that are used to supporting a global enterprise, global customers. So we've gotten accustomed to almost this remote response and support structure. So I feel very lucky and appreciative of being in an industry where we've been able to support probably a bit more rapidly than others, but it's only because that's how our operating model has required us to be able to support the business in this specific industry. But again, every organization's got to apply that enterprise risk management lens to everything that they're doing. To Nicole's point, it's all about understanding where you can flex and where you need to bend to be able to ensure that you can continue to support their business. I think for a lot of companies, they were just trying to understand, how do we stay afloat, right? How do we keep transacting with our customers? How do we continue to support our employees, right? So you have to look at the risk versus the reward when it comes to risk management, and do you make some concessions in order to keep the money coming into your organization, in order to keep paying your employees? But that's effective risk management, right? So I think that's a lot of what we've been talking about so far.
Yeah, fair. That's fair. And Nicole, you touched upon, burnout, right? Fatigue. Companies have made significant investments in offices to ensure employees have a comfortable, safe, supportive office experience, right, while at work. Unless employees have, that dedicated workspace in their residence, it's not likely to be an identical experience, right? So how have you helped to keep on top of the sensitivities while maintaining that collaborative environment to ensure that employees can still be productive, right, for you and the company?
So, and what's interesting is, like, Carrier has an amazing environment in most of our buildings, right? Like, we have a healthy buildings initiative, and
Yeah.
we help people to make sure that they have an environment that's productive. And so it's so interesting because we do have such a great environment, and actually, you know, people migrating to their office location where some people had the right equipment, some people didn't. That was tough, right? So a lot of us were used to going into the office where we have our dual monitors and we have our ergonomic chairs and we have everything that we need. And then, at home, you don't. And so for some of us, I know for some of my teams, it was having a conversation about what does a really good workspace look like at home, and what can you do to make for a comfortable workspace? And so there were dialogues upon dialogues on what that looks like, and then really helping people manage their time a little bit more, because now that you're at home, you don't have that one maybe hour to commute. You don't have to get dressed. You don't have to do a lot of things you had to do in the past, right? So you can spring right to work. You can get up, get yourself together and spring to work and then work for, as long as you want. And then at some point you have to turn it off. So it's right. How do you get people to really balance personal and work when now they're colliding and they're the same? And so it's
Very
really
much.
being intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah, Christian, I mean,
Very
this is
much.
really tough.
It's
Really
really
tough
tough.
for us.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely tough for us. So here, if you look at my industry, clearly, let's say the compute backbone actually has been built for redundancy.
Yeah.
So that's fine, but the real thing is where the people are. And I'm actually
Yes.
seeing exactly the same thing. We all got stuck somewhere. And some people on the other side of the globe of where our offices are. And yeah, everybody works. So suddenly you have here the situation. I start at 4 a.m. local time and I get emails at 11 p.m. and it's like kind of relentless. And then the other part, which again shows it's about people, there are folks working from their kitchen table. And I think it's okay probably to work for 2 hours from your kitchen table, but not 16. And
Right.
you can go to the chiropractor and you can go and get the chair. And yeah, and the informal breaks have kind of disappeared. We all used to get a coffee, have a chit chat at the water cooler. So besides the health issue, the other one is actually the informal parts of communication has actually disappeared. And suddenly, if you actually talk about risk, again, these informal conversations keep an organization together. There are non-documented workflows which just used to happen because people do exception management at the water cooler. And this has all disappeared and suddenly actually would need to be monitored. So I would need a score. Have I actually had enough interactions with my staff and not just with my direct reports and the CEO and the board? And off you go. And suddenly people actually start to feel disenfranchised simply because they feel they are stuck in Taiwan. One of my team members is stuck in Taiwan. And yeah, okay, great. But then he's completely isolated if we wouldn't actively manage his interactions with the rest of the crew.
Yeah.
That's interesting, Christian. Did I hear you? Did I hear you correctly when you said you kind of want to have a risk score for how effective you are communicating and managing your interactions with the team, the downstream team, as well as the executives? Did I hear that correctly?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So yeah, something like a net promoter score, or I think, Eric, you are way better in defining this than I could ever be. But yeah, like a score which actually measures that I'm properly interacting with everybody along the chain, and a score that actually people do the right thing for their bodies. So again, on a personal note, I'm probably working like 18 hours a day, and I used to go on a treadmill every day. Hey, since COVID hit, I've seen the treadmill, but only in passing. It's like 15 foot this way, but I've never been on it. And the reality is like getting a little score that it actually would be good to take care of my personal and my team's health actually would be wonderful. And so really manage this end to end.
Interesting. That's an interesting thought, and I love the thought because that shows you really care. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
How about you, Chris? It sounds like you kind of adopted a solid remote work experience, if you will, prior to COVID. How has that changed? How has that evolved?
Yeah, so the technology part of it has been no news is good news, right? Which is great for us. But for those who know me and know my amazing wife, she who also works in the cyber and the risk space, she's a remote worker already. And so this lovely office that I'm in was her office up until a few months ago, because I didn't know how long I was going to be working from home. So I was set up to Christian's point, not in the kitchen, but in the bedroom, right? On a little $15 IKEA desk. I'm a big guy and I'm like crouched on my laptop, right? And
Sure.
so, Kirsten felt kind of bad for me after the first month and a half. And she said, you know what, we don't know how long this is going to take, let you go into the office and she'll hang out in the bedroom. So now when she rolls out of bed in the morning, she goes about 2.5 feet and then sits down at the office in the bedroom. Now we've upgraded the IKEA desk to a nice, kind of stand-up desk. But to Christian's point, how do we make sure that we're delineating between our working from home and our actually being at home, right? Those lines have start to become more and more blurred. And I mean, it really started when we all got Blackberries and beepers many, many years ago, right? Because there was no real way to unplug from work. And now it's even more difficult, I think. And from my perspective, I think it really starts with the tone at the top, right? As a leader, I'm trying to disconnect from my team as much as I can after hours. I don't necessarily want them to see me sending emails at all hours of the night, sending them text messages, because I want them to be able to segregate work from home, because we don't have the physical ability to get into your vehicle and drive 15, 60 minutes to get to a place that you have that ability to disconnect both physically and kind of emotionally. So I don't want them to emulate my behavior if they see me continually sending emails and messages in the evenings. And it can be difficult in some of these leadership positions, but I think for their health, their welfare, their morale, it's a step that we need to take, to help them manage that a little bit.
Yeah. So what's interesting, if I may actually come back to this, in preparation of this meeting, Eric, we did actually an employee survey to find out how they want this to look like in the future. So who actually believes it's better to return to the office? Who actually believes they actually want to work from home and of course are more productive from home? And the interesting result is, guess what percentage actually wants to return to the office full time?
30%?
10.
Yeah, I would say less than that.
10%.
I would say less than 30 for sure.
10%, and 50% are saying they want to have half in the office, half at home, and they are more productive that way. And 40% are saying, let's just get rid of all this office thing at all. I'm way more productive from home. And see, this was like anonymous. They could say whatever they said, and then they actually asked us for figuring out how the work environment needs to look like to support this. So I would actually say those office workers will be a minority. And so now then, if we actually flip this around, the finance guys got really excited because they said, oh, wonderful, 90% don't want to be full-time in the office, 40% never want to come, and the other only want to be half-time in the office. So you can do some little math and you actually find, hey, let's reduce office space by 60% and it pays off. And then we said, wonderful, then how about we shell out some of this money that people get dual monitors for home, desk which where you can vary the height, you name it, and so on, and that they can actually get a decent webcam, some lighting so that they don't sit in the dark in these calls and so on. So it's actually kind of interesting. It's actually a sign that it's going to stay, because probably our organization isn't the only organization who has done these surveys, and probably more people will come back to the same thing. And then a way, if you could help orchestrating this process in a rational way, how you do this best, so that not we all go off and actually test individually, I think that actually would be fantastic. You could produce a playbook, Eric, just as a suggestion.
Interesting. And Chris, I see you shaking your head pretty hard. It sounds like you can relate.
So I'm pretty lucky because my headquarters is probably 13 minutes away from my house, right? So I don't have a super long commute, right? But I'd ask everyone on this call, take a mental note and raise a mental hand. If you have a 30-minute, 45-minute, 60-minute or more commute every day. I was talking to a vendor friend of mine who happens to reside in the Boston kind of metro area, and he said, 6 months ago, I'd have to get up 5-something in the morning to have my behind in a seat at 8 a.m. Right? Get the kids off, get my car, get to the train, whatever happens to be, and then reverse that in the evening, right? he said that is such a foreign concept to me now. So you know, those folks on this call right now who have that hour plus commute, think about that as well. He said, you know, my health, my sleep, the additional time with my family has been amazing to me. I'm getting more sleep, but I'm actually becoming more productive. He said, I don't know that I could ever go back to that commute life, right? And I think we need to be very sensitive to that as we go forward. And you know, my thought is a lot of organizations, if they're not looking at formally adopting and operationalizing some type of remote or flex policy, they're going to lose opportunities and talent to organizations that do take a hard look at it. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Nicole, you're seeing similar trends on your side as well?
Yeah, I think people, so I'm 5 minutes from the office, so I don't have a commute issue. I could go either way. I prefer the 50-50, but I mean, we did something very similar, and you know, people find themselves more productive. Like I said, the only thing is that people have to manage their time a little bit better. But as far as, you know, the commuting, the preparation in the morning, all of that goes away. So we start our jobs a little bit earlier, and we're able to work and be a little bit more flexible with our time, right? Because if you're working till 6 or 7 o'clock at night, you can take a break in the middle, right? And tend to other things, maybe some personal things that you need to get done. We're very flexible about stuff like that, and I find that this is going to become the new norm, right? Like if you do anything for over 90 days, it becomes a habit, and all of a sudden you forget what it was like to commute, go into the office, you know, the routine in the morning. And so now that's what we're hearing from people, like, I can't remember when we did this, or we, you know, had to go into the office. And I think the people like choice. They like the opportunity to choose. And I think what happens is, now that we're in this situation where we've proven out that people can work remotely, it is now a viable option. And if given a choice, people are going to choose at least to work from home, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50% of the time, versus going into the office 100% of the time.
Interesting. Agreed. You know, and links traditionally being a remote workforce, obviously with the office presence and the like, but we really did provide that as flexibility because we looked at it as a bonus, if you will, right, or a plus for retaining and hiring top talent. You know, last question around people. You know, prior to COVID, you know, we had a big struggle with the skill shortage, right, around cybersecurity. It's been very tough finding the right talent to help you all execute the programs that you all are responsible for in your organization. Prior to the pandemic, it was deemed a pipeline problem, right? How would you classify it now with the company budgets contracting, layoffs happening, furloughs occurring? How would you describe the talent, the talent pool and the exercise of actually finding the right talent to execute your programs today? And Chris, I'll start with you on that one.
yeah, so, you know, Eric, you know, and others who I've worked with know that that's a topic that's very kind of near and dear to me. Both my wife Kirsten and I get very heavily involved in the ICMCP and trying to make sure that we're bridging that gap in diversity and inclusion within cybersecurity. And, you know, I don't know that I've seen that change necessarily. I will say, as an organization who's not had to go through those budget cuts, I think the challenges still remain. I think there's still this massive untapped pool of talent that's out there, who have voices that want and need to be heard, and we need to continue to find ways to reach them. And I think this is a great time to do that. I know a lot of InfoSec pros and other IT folks have unfortunately been furloughed or laid off. And if they have the ability, I think this is a great time to try to find some ways to advance your networking, you know, join organizations, learn something new, upskill. There are so many free and low cost resources out there. Find a mentor. You know, this is an opportunity, I think, where you might be able to turn a negative factor into something positive. The talent is out there. We just have to groom it. We have to reach it. we have to embrace it and bring them in and give them an opportunity. If nothing else, I think there's probably more talent out there now because, again, unfortunately, there have been some layoffs. And again, I think the other silver lining would be as organizations, and hopefully they will start to adopt more of this flexible remote option. If I need to bring in a pen test engineer who happens to live in Tooele, Utah, because they're taking care of family, and I don't have to relocate them to Columbus, Ohio, why not take advantage of that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So I would concur with what Chris is saying, that now the workforce is way more global. It actually doesn't matter if somebody is in Portland, they can work in New Jersey remotely, no problem. Or look at me, I'm effectively 7,000 miles direct line away from my office. And well, it has been working fine so far. I think there's another one related to what Chris is saying. Yeah, we actually need to understand that people actually got laid off and are looking for new opportunities. So I think as a panelist, I just want to say I'm actually here to mentor and help people who are on this call. So you can reach out to me. You can look at my network, or we can talk about how skills can be developed. And I think we all owe our colleagues and peers these support in the difficult times. And
well said, Christian. Now, Nicole, you were just standing up your program before all of this hit. Have you seen it become easier after the pandemic, or still status quo?
I would certainly say that people are more open, because the fact that companies are now allowing people to work remote, right? It's not like you're calling people and saying, hey, we've got this job down in South Florida and now we want you to relocate, right? It's you can work from Boston, you can work from Connecticut, you can work from California, and we want your expertise. So I think that there is this paradigm that's occurring right now, and I think there's an opportunity for people to explore careers with companies that they might not otherwise have looked at, because they're open. They recognize that remote work could potentially work. And right now, I mean, a lot of norms are now being established around how to do this effectively. And because of that, I think, like I said, if I was on the market, I would see it as an opportunity. If I am looking for people to hire, I would see it as an opportunity as well. So where we have that negative unemployment, I think if you wanted to look at a certain company, or you wanted to look at opportunities that maybe a company has, now would be the time.
Perfect. Thank you, Nicole. And I could not agree more. I could not agree more. I wanted to make sure we covered quite a bit on people, because at the end of the day, those are our most valuable assets, right? As a company, and owners of programs that are measuring risk. I'm going to shift a little bit to process, right? Because processes definitely have had to change. I mean, I think few corporate functions shifted priorities so much and so quickly when the pandemic struck as corporate cybersecurity and operations, and then the technology providers that support them. There are a ton of employees, as we mentioned earlier, who have found themselves in work from home models. Security executives are adjusting. They're pivoting from working on those routine tasks to moving towards long-term goals and establishing secure connections for those newly minted remote workers. There's a lot that is happening and being reevaluated from a process perspective. But for Christian, and I'll start with you if you don't mind. How have you seen processes evolve to enable you to assess risk and report on the gaps to prevent attacks while employees continue to work from this home environment? How have things shifted for you?
Yes. So, yeah, see, as I said, we really didn't expect an outage like this. And as typical in our industry, we have lots of real-time status reporting just to keep the business going. What I'd say we actually have been missing during the beginning of the crisis. Everybody was hands-on, 18 hours a day. Let's start at 4 a.m. We'll figure this out somehow. What would be good would be like a cockpit, if you see what I'm talking about. If you have a pilot, he has all these gauges. You can actually see, am I flying up? Are things going down? This flap has a problem. So we're in the process of creating a system like that, so that we can actually see next time this location could potentially get wiped out. So basically instrumenting the entire processes of the organization and having what I would call a redundancy score that once a month we as the leadership team can actually look at an overall score and actually see, are we ready for it? And then when the next crisis comes, and of course there will be one, but a different one, that we have this cockpit that we can actually hone in on the right areas immediately, instead of spending frankly hours on the phone figuring out what's actually happening where and why this stuff ain't gonna work. If that kind of makes sense.
It does. It does. And Nicole, I know that you were kind of standing up a new program, so some of the processes that you may have been familiar with running other security programs may not have been easily adopted in this new program. How have you approached, right, the processes for your program in ways that we discussed, to be able to better assess the risk and report on the gaps that you are managing in this new norm, if you will?
Yeah, so I think we're in a unique situation, right? Because we are going through or undergoing a certain set of assessments already. And so that was us just baselining the program, really understanding, where we needed to improve, what processes we needed to put in place. It's standard build, right? And so we were already there. I think we have, we're in a fortunate situation because we can take what we've learned as a part of COVID and really kind of retrofit our processes. We're building them, right? So most companies have tech debt, and we do as well, but we do get a chance to kind of reimagine cyber, right? And so this was a component that, obviously, not knowing that the pandemic was going to occur, we weren't ready for. But I think there's an opportunity for us to really identify gaps, which we've done that, like through a lessons learned. What did we learn as a part of this? Where were our gaps? And then how do we, create processes to kind of manage those gaps a little differently? And so that's kind of where we are. It's number one, we didn't have a true pandemic plan. I think nobody did. I think everybody talked about it. And, I was a part of the federal government. So we've been talking about pandemics for years and pandemic readiness. And so, but corporate America really didn't have anything in place for that. And so, it was a wake-up call for us. There are now, and I've made some recommendations to partners about, this is where we kind of need a pandemic risk assessment, right? To kind of help us figure out those gaps, like formally, and then document them, and then work on pandemic proofing our companies. So to me, there should be an opportunity coming out of this, where we've talked about disaster recovery. Business continuity has always been a big deal, right? But pandemics are a little different in that this whole remote work, especially health pandemic, is a little different. Now we're all at home. We just didn't factor that. Even with all of the scenarios, we didn't factor it. So, I have a few of the vendors I've talked to that are putting something together like that, because I think it's necessary and really kind of helps us, give us a scorecard on how well we did and what we need to improve, and what our next steps are, so that it's kind of top of mind, even after we complete this COVID-19 pandemic, which may take a lot more time than anticipated.
Sure. Agreed. Thank you for that. Well said. Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a topic by itself we could probably spend 3 or 4 hours talking about, right? But I think for me, this is a big reason why I'm such a big fan of risk management, but also of organizations adopting standard program frameworks, right? Whether it's the NIST cybersecurity, whether it's the CIS top 20, I think that has provided us and other organizations the ability to almost rapidly triage what your current posture is, what your current risks that you may be facing are. I think, you know, if you look at things from a very pragmatic approach, what we've always tried to do, I think, is understand that we don't have our crown jewels. All organizations are not within these four castle walls with a moat anymore. So it comes down to how do we make sure that we're protecting our data, our information, no matter where it is? How has that changed once we move into this work from home environment? Once you understand where your data is, who has that data, you can quickly enumerate the processes that are already in place to be able to adequately protect that information and do a bit of a quick assessment to say, well, you know what, because we already had some very effective controls that were inherited simply by plugging in your laptop in your cubicle in your office, right? You inherit those controls, for example. Now we have to understand which of those controls may or may not scale into a work from home environment. And you mentioned some previously, right? Like patching. You know, you may not have contemplated the ability to be able to patch your entire workforce off net, so to speak. Collaboration ability, right? I think a lot of us have started to adopt this cloud first strategy as well. So if you look at a lot of these mobile workforces, when they go home and plug into their home networks, they may already have access to 75% of all of the information and the data that they need. And I think that brings up an important topic around, you know, during this pandemic, check in on your third-party providers, check in on those critical vendors, because guess what? They're also experiencing a pandemic, right? Whether it's a cloud provider, whether it's the Microsofts, whether it's the AWS, whether it's your outsourced managed security providers, offshore, onshore. So I think that's a critical part of the process that we haven't necessarily touched on is if you're reliant heavily on cloud environments, make sure that you're following up with those folks and they've got their own disaster recovery plans. They've got their own business continuity in place to make sure that they're there to support you as well. So,
yeah, well said, well said. And you know, you touch upon the providers, and let's face it, you know, these challenges that you all are facing have obviously spilled over to the technology providers, and you know, companies like Lynx and your vendors and your key partners are doing everything that we can to pivot to keep up with our customer shifting needs, right? And we're trying to find ways to institute at least new ways of doing business to further support your goals and objectives. How have you seen your partners kind of step up and help you best prepare to manage the increase of these cyber threats, be it social engineering, phishing campaigns, ransom requests, changing data centers in Christian's case? How have you seen your partners step up and support you through this pandemic? Nicole, can I start with you on that one?
So I think we were in a unique situation. Remember, we were building the program, so vendor management was pretty critical for us, right? We were choosing solutions, we're choosing partners that we thought would really kind of help us in building the program. So I think we had to jump on that. Like the strategic planning that we were already a part of was very critical. So it was easy for us to go to our vendors and kind of explain the situation and get them to really kind of help us with more licensing or, you know, additional support as we ramped up our workforce, our remote workforce to work from home. Those strategic partnerships were critical. And I think about it now and really understand the value of vendor management and being able to call a vendor, you know, on the fly and say, we've got this situation, can you help us out? And solutioning with your vendors. And so we did a lot of that. That first first few weeks of COVID-19, we had to scale, right? Again, 20% of our workforce was used to working from home, only 20%. So we got to get the other 80%. So being able to call your strategic vendors and explain the situation, which they knew we're all having the same problem, was critical for us. And they came through. I can tell you, we have some great vendors that really answered the call, they answered the mail. And in some instances for us, because we were still building, we were ramping up on licensing. So we were able to strike some really critical, amazing COVID-19 deals that really positioned my program to be extremely successful and still preserve cash, right? Because I mean, think about it, all of our businesses were suffering, especially the first few months. We're trying to figure out, like, how do we make money in this COVID-19 environment? How do we get our workforces back to normal? And so cash is king, and we needed to contribute just like everybody else in the organization. But they really showed up for us big time and helped us to still achieve our goals, which is to protect the company while not breaking the bank. So kudos to, and they know who they are. Kudos to all of the vendors who reached out, who partnered, who made themselves available in the middle of the night. I can tell you, we had calls. We're a global company, so we're up 24/7 making it happen. And our vendors were kind of right next to us, really participating. So.
Awesome, awesome. That's great. Chris, how about yourself?
Yeah, definitely echo some of what Nicole brought to the forefront there. I think what I've appreciated from a lot of our vendors, if not all of them, has been a level of empathy to our plight as an industry.
Right.
I think they understand that we're all in this together. I've seen a lot of instances where they have deferred payments. I've seen vendors who have offered credits for businesses who maybe had to shut down during the pandemic. So I've seen that happen. Shameless plug, I'm on the board of directors of the Retail and Hospitality ISAC, and we offered trial memberships for any retail or hospitality organization, so we could exchange threat information, exchange best practices to those organizations who, were suffering at the time. So yeah, I think the empathy that we've seen from a lot of the vendors, understanding that either organizations have gone through budget cuts or restrictions, and also potentially layoffs and furloughs, and those organizations may not be so focused on installing that next new shiny thing this year. They may not be prepared to upgrade or refresh that hardware or that software because they're having to redirect focus and resources to keep the business afloat. So I've not seen that that kind of pushy edge that we typically may see from a lot of vendors. So I know it's been appreciated across the leaders in the industry.
Excellent, excellent. Kristen, you seeing similar treatment from your partners?
Yeah, in general, I actually do see support from most of the partners, with one exception. And yeah, but clearly like a struggling organization who try to solve their problems in a different way, which is probably not what I would call long-term smart. So yes, we are seeing exactly the same thing. Again, for our people, we have been trying to create a protective environment for our people so that we can actually help our customers same way. We have been expecting that our people work 24/7 to ensure that the infrastructure is up and running for everybody, and the leadership team has made themselves available as a sounding board in many cases. And I think that's the spirit of sharing and helping each other is actually a good one, and hopefully we can actually move this forward once more normality returns. Looks like we lost Eric, and so,
I think we did.
here you are. See, Eric, we just experienced the critical infrastructure.
The magic of technology, right?
The magic of technology. This is what people are telling me. Can I please get redundant connectivity in some shape?
Exactly.
Am I
Can
back?
I get?
You're
You are
back.
back.
You're
Exactly. Exactly.
It had to happen. It had to happen, right?
It had to happen. But
I'm
see,
surprised. I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner, only because we had the major storms here in New Jersey
Yes.
yesterday, and we still have millions of people in New Jersey and New York out of power. Right? Again, another scenario that we have to begin planning.
Exactly. See?
As,
exactly.
I
Exactly.
promise, audience, that was not planned.
Yes. But
Uh,
see, here we go. See, we found another risk, which
That's
takes
it.
us back to having a decent scoring system, real-time monitoring. So in this case, given that we all looked at you and we were just going through the social process of stepping up to imagine the next question ourselves.
Right. We
And
were gonna ad lib. We were gonna make it work.
we are going to make it work, Eric.
An opportunity to do so, because in the 5-6 minutes left we have left, I want to kind of ask you all to take a few minutes to talk about some of the key takeaways you'd like our audience to hear from you all. So if I could start with you, Christian. I know your world is pretty interesting with that international flair that you have going on. So talk to us about some of the key takeaways you'd like audience to have, please. Top 2 or 3.
So imagine we have a global globe, and so think about people having some close to you, physically close to you, and have some people in a very remote place, and then instrument the way of working. So if New Jersey gets wiped out, hey, you have somebody somewhere else who will just fill in as Eric's right-hand man, and the conversation continues. So start with the people, instrumented, and build redundancy. And,
well said. Well said. Chris, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm gonna use a phrase that I did not come up with, but I believe I read it on LinkedIn, and I really appreciated it. And they said that work is an outcome. It's not a place that you go. Right? Work is an outcome. It's not a place that you go. And so I think for me, we have to all remember that we're not working from home necessarily because we choose to right now. We are working from home while we're managing a global pandemic, right? And so for those of us in the United States, it's been quite a tumultuous year. The political environment, a lot of the other news that's hit our area, and I think my takeaway would be, let's all make sure that we're overly communicative with each other. We check in on one another. We're there for one another. We help to manage the relationships in a different way. We have to lead, think, and act a little bit differently. Also, keep in mind, you may have team members, or you may be a member of a team yourself where you live by yourself, right? And your only ability to really interact with others on a personal and a face-to-face level might be in the office. And so let's be mindful of those folks and maybe pay a little extra attention, give them a little more of your time. As leaders, I think that's our number one responsibility, is to make sure that we're enabling our folks to be able to take care of us. So that's really a key takeaway I'd like to leave for the group.
Very well said, Chris. Thank you. Nicole?
I think it's people first, right? So at Carrier, we have the Carrier way, and we rolled that out, and that's, to be respectful of people, collaborate, communicate, and know that we're all one team. That's so, so important. When you think about how you rally together after something like a pandemic, we did it during 9/11. I feel like we're trying to do it now as a nation and as globally. And I think that that's important. I think from a cybersecurity perspective, it's really focus on fundamentals, right? So when you think about risk management, it's always people first, right? So, and technology second. So how do we focus on those fundamentals? That's really, tried and true. We know what protects organizations, and we need to really kind of focus on getting those things done, and everything else will kind of follow. And just, prepare the workforce, right? So a part of this is constant communication and education, right? I think we miss that component because everybody's so focused on we go in the office, but we realize some of us who know how to work remote, we understand the process, but everybody's not there yet. So where we can is really educating others and helping everybody get to the same place, maybe not in the same way, but in time. So those are my key takeaways.
Well said, well said. Thank you very much. Christian, Chris, Nicole, I cannot thank you all enough for spending this hour with us. I'm sure the audience enjoyed the dialogue, and I know that they have a ton of questions that we will be answering for them offline via email. But I really do appreciate you all supporting me during this panel, and I want to wish you all continued success in this new norm called COVID. And with all that said, we're at the top of the hour, and I'm going to go ahead and wind us down. Thank you very much again. I really do appreciate it. Let's wave goodbye to all of our attendees.
Thanks, folks.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you
Thanks
so much.
And we'll talk
Thank
to you.
you. Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.